It really is like enlightening and wonderful to know that your menstrual cycle doesn't have to be the enemy. In fact, it's almost a gift from your body communicating what it needs, what your body needs. And I think when you can come to terms with that and when you can understand that fully, you can really start to work with it.
In this week's episode of Great Conversations, I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down and talking to Laura Teare-Jones. Laura is a hormone and mindset coach and a fierce advocate for PMDD and women's health. Laura Teare-Jones, welcome to Great Conversations. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
You are more than welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today, and I'm really excited to dive into what you talk about in terms of linking hormone, menstrual cycle with productivity for business. So I know that we'll get into that a little bit later. But before then, we have your question that was left by the previous guest. I'm not going to lie. It's extremely difficult and I don't know how I would answer this. So, Laura, your question is, if you could rewind the clock and handle a situation completely differently, what would that situation be and why do you wish you'd handled it differently?
Okay. So, when I left uni, I just got my degree in social welfare. And I'd been in education since since I was 3, and I just needed a break from education. And I considered doing my master's, but I thought, you know what, I just want to earn some money and get a job and not have to think about exams and coursework for a while. And I think I panicked. And I always say to people, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And especially when I was 21, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just kind of started my career with anything. And that set a bit of a precedent really for just going from one job to another, jobs that I hated, jobs that weren't good for my health, that led to burnout. None of them that were really of value to me, none of them that really spoke to me. So they were kind of admin jobs, finance jobs, that just didn't light me up in any way. And actually, they really contributed to my mental health. And I guess I just never felt like there was any other option. I think when I was little, I always just assumed that I would end up in an office. And it took me a long time to unlearn that. So I wish that I could just go back and have a word with myself and just say, what do you actually want to do with your life? Stop doing what everyone else is doing. You know, I went to uni because that's what my friends were doing. I went to college because that's what my friends were doing. And I just wish that actually I'd had a word with myself and thought about what I wanted to do with my life. And, I wish that I knew that there were more possibilities.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And I think that, as you say, when you're at such a young age as well, it's really difficult. And one of the things that I find is that people often approach that conversation with what do you want to do? And I look back now and I think I wish somebody at that age of, 17, 18 had asked me who I wanted to be. Because I think, like you just saying, it opens up so many different possibilities, doesn't it? Like when you know yourself and you start to think about what type of person you want to be in the world and how you want to show up, then you start making very different decisions about what then you do. You start making very different decisions about what relationships you're in, don't you? So it's like sort of, that starting point of career from values, isn't it? A values piece rather than as you say, like an economic, monetary, or just doing what everyone else is doing by getting a job.
Yeah, 100%. I wish that, at the time, if somebody had spoken to me about my values, I wouldn't have even known what they meant, because that was never kind of discussed with me. No one had ever said to me, Laura, what's really important for you? Like, what matters to you most? And now that's something that I live and breathe. I live and breathe my values. I support other people with theirs. And yet at the time, I didn't have a clue, like, what I valued. I didn't know. I didn't have that, almost that mind.
Yeah. And so what was your journey to get to where you are today in terms of living and breathing your values and knowing what they are?
Oh my goodness, how long have you got?
As long as you need.
So after uni, I went from job to job, all very similar but different. So they were kind of finance, corporate finance, local government finance, admin jobs. And they were just jobs. That's all they were. They were income. And for me, the best thing that I could do was get through the working week unscathed, not indulging in office politics, and just getting paid each month so I could enjoy my time outside of work. And that was okay, that it worked for a while. But at the time, I was also living undiagnosed with PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And for anyone who's not heard of that, PMDD is a cyclical hormone-based mood disorder. So if you take something like PMS and you blow that up, you've probably got something that kind of represents PMDD. It's a very extreme condition with severe psychological, emotional, and physical symptoms, but it's actually quite common, so it affects 1 in 20. But
oh wow.
yeah.
And so what are some of the like indications so how can you differentiate between PMS and PMDD? What are some of the things that you need to look out for?
So I guess that the first thing I would say is most people are familiar with PMS. So PMS is something that the majority of people who have periods will experience at some point. And, kind of typically it's something that might make you feel a bit emotional, or you might get some physical symptoms like bloating or stomach cramps around the time of your period. The key thing is PMS isn't thought to be debilitating. It can be a bit disruptive, but it's not debilitating. And that's the main thing that differentiates the two, because PMDD is very severe. So symptoms tend to start around ovulation, which is around 2 weeks before a period begins, typically and generally speaking. So what you can imagine there is, whereas PMS tends to be a day or a couple of days around the time of your period or just before, PMDD can be around 2 weeks of every month if you've got a typical kind of 28-day cycle. So it's a very long time to be feeling those symptoms, and the symptoms can be depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. The physical symptoms can be, like for me, I extreme bloat. So I look like 8 months pregnant when my symptoms are bad. I also get really bad migraines that just take me out. They absolutely just take me out. I can't do anything during that time. And unfortunately, 1 in 3 people who live with PMDD have attempted suicide. So that really kind of puts it into context, doesn't it? That it's not something that's disruptive. It's not something that's just a bit of a pain in the bum. It's severe. It's really serious. And because it's like a perfect cocktail, really, of mental health stigma and period shame. So people don't talk about it, which means it gets undiagnosed. A lot of healthcare professionals aren't aware of it. And I wasn't diagnosed until I was 28. So that was a long time living with that condition unknowingly.
Yeah. And you're so right, because like when you talk about period shame, there really is, isn't there? Like it's always quite horrifying to me how, as a woman, I was taught and knew so little about my body, about what was normal, like quote unquote normal. But as you say, like it's just not common, even amongst really close girlfriends, to spark a conversation about your period and to, ask other people if they're experiencing similar things, or just even to know what to expect, isn't it?
But sometimes it does feel like we're not getting anywhere here. And recently I had a conversation with my niece, similar to this one, where she was kind of like, so what is PMDD? And, she's like 21, so she has periods. She understands or so I thought, what periods were. And so I said, well, it's a bit like, if you take PMS, and I explained how PMS isn't thought to be debilitating. And she was like, so what's PMS then? And I just thought, how has nobody explained PMS to you? How do you not know what this is? If people aren't even talking about PMS, we've got no hopes of raising awareness of PMDD, have we?
Yeah, I recently had the privilege of hearing you talk about the different stages of our menstrual cycles, and also talking about how they can be a superpower, and actually there's real empowerment in, linking our productivity and how we run a business to our cycles. So I guess my request is, would you mind sort of taking us through, so like the 101, Noddy's guide to periods, what they look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that might feel a bit like, oh, people know about periods and menstrual cycle, but they really don't. And, just to say, I think when I think about my education about periods and the menstrual cycle from back when I was in school, my so-called education about that topic was more about kind of like, how to put condoms on a banana. That's what we did in like those classes. It wasn't about kind of the fluctuations in hormones. It wasn't about what would happen internally. It was just about, do not get pregnant. That was kind of the take-home message. So I think it's really important that this is covered. And I think the best way to do that is actually by thinking about your menstrual cycle. And we say a typical menstrual cycle is 28 days. And actually, the reality is the majority of people don't have a 28-day cycle. So it might be a bit longer, it might be a bit shorter, but the average is around 28 days. And if you think about your period as being around 5 days, and again, I'm speaking very generally here, your period is about 5 days long. If you think of that in terms of the seasons, so the 4 seasons of nature, your period would be like the winter. So when you're on your period, you might just feel like kind of going inwards. You might feel like retreating and just resting a bit more. You might eat a little bit more, and that's absolutely normal. Now, the danger in that time, if you're not aware of this as being such a natural, normal thing, is you start to think of yourself as lazy. You think of yourself as, oh, I'm eating too much, or I can't do anything, I can't function, I'm disorganized. And actually, it's just hormones saying to us, just strip it back, just come backwards and come into yourself. And that is a huge opportunity there to reflect on what's important for you, on your business, where you're going. And so that's like massive. If you can actually see that time on your period as a time to chill out a bit and let the kind of creativity flow within your mind, as opposed to going out there networking and doing that kind of, go hard or go home. You can save that for later on in your cycle. But on your period, I always say just be. And if you think then that once your period finishes, think of that as your spring. So think of how you've been feeling recently when you notice that the mornings are getting a little bit lighter and the evenings are a bit lighter. You start to have this almost optimism, don't you, that spring is on its way. And that's how people can start to feel at the end of their period. They just start to feel a bit brighter, a little bit like, maybe I can do things actually. Maybe I want to do things. And again, there's huge strength in that because you just feel like, I can do things again. There's possibility, and that's wonderful.
What's going on like hormonally and in the background, and how long does that last? So as you say, sort of the period often lasts for some people like, 5 days, 3 to 5 days, you're bleeding, then you go into spring. So what would that, if we go like technically, what is that part of our cycle called? And then how long does that usually last for?
So this is the follicular phase of your cycle. So the follicular phase is day 1, which is day 1 of your period. So day 1 of your period is day 1 of your next menstrual cycle. And again, typically speaking, this lasts for around 14 days up until ovulation. So the first 5-ish days will be your period or your spring, and then your winter. And then you move into your spring where things are just starting to feel good. And then towards ovulation, which is day 14, that's summer. And we all know how we feel when summer arrives. So ovulation, things are just feeling ace. You can do anything. You have got these amazing superpowers and everything is possible. And this is a time when typically a lot of people will stretch their comfort zones at work, or they will absolutely nail it in a meeting. They will decide to make big changes in their business. They will just be feeling like, I've so got this. And at ovulation, your hormones are peaking. So your estrogen, your progesterone, they're all peaking, they're all here. And your estrogen is responsible for so many bodily functions, but also how you look at ovulation. So you can almost like, your skin will be brighter at ovulation. Your hair will be like feeling healthier. And this is all linked to, ovulation is the time when a person is most likely to get pregnant. So, if we really, really strip this back, that is a time really when you're attracting a mate. So, yeah.
I was just going to say that. So it's mad that now, as you're explaining it, I hadn't even. So, first of all, I did not know that your first day, like your menstrual cycle, starts from the first day that you bleed. So, thank you for that. I literally had no idea when or what that was. And then exactly what you're saying, like as you're describing ovulation, I was like, oh my God, well, obviously, because you're trying to attract a mate. Like, the whole point of ovulating is to procreate. So that you want to be seen, you want to be out there, you want to be sort of, attracting people. That is really interesting. I had not even thought about that.
It's really funny, isn't it, when you think about it? Like that is the whole point of ovulation, and it's all about reproduction. And of course, many people that is not on the agenda. Like they do not want to reproduce. They don't want to be looking for a mate. And so think of the strengths in other ways. It's a time to really be seen in your business, to get out there networking or record a podcast. It's the time when you've got all these superpowers just because your hormones will be making you feel amazing. So go for it, own it, and just enjoy that feeling.
How long does that usually last for?
So ovulation is around 1 day long, but in the build up to ovulation, you're going to be feeling really good as well. What's really interesting is many people don't know when they ovulate, because ovulation is basically when the egg is released from your ovary and travels down the fallopian tube, where it could then meet sperm. So I really feel like this is a sex education class now.
It's amazing. Bring it on. Yeah.
So that is what ovulation is. But for a lot of people, there's so much more in that. It's a time when you just feel amazing. You don't necessarily know what's going on internally. For some people who are unlucky, and I count myself in this, you do know when you ovulate because you actually feel it happen. So I get ovulation pain every month. And, the majority of people don't have that pain.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's not actually, the norm. And I've had scans, I've had tests to rule anything out. But I remember the first time I spoke to my GP about it, she was just like, yeah, you're just unlucky. And I was like, no, this is really bad.
And is it to be anything to be concerned about? So if people are listening to this and they're like, oh, I get it as well, like, should you go to the GP or?
I think it's worth going to the GP, because I remember being concerned that there was something quite bad going on, because the pain was really intense for me, and it still is. And so I would always go to a GP just so they can rule out anything, like ovarian cysts and things like that. But what I was told is, yeah, some people just get it. There's not really a known cause. It's very under-researched because it's not thought to be anything that causes other issues. So it's just one of those things, unfortunately. For me, living with PMDD, that is just the start of things to really go downhill, if that makes sense. So once a person is ovulated, and you imagine that's kind of summertime, they then go into autumn. It is a time where maybe you will just retreat back a little bit. It's a time when you won't be as up for being out and about and being the face of your business and socializing. It's more of a time when you do just want to just take a step back and slow down. And again, that has its huge benefits, because for me, I always say that's like my admin time. So that's the time for me where I send out my invoices. It's the time when I record things that I don't have to have my face on, and I can just kind of, record audio with no makeup on, and, I can really kind of indulge in that time. But unfortunately, what PMDD brings with it are those more severe psychological symptoms as well. And this is where a person with PMDD can really struggle, because it's not just about kind of retreating and going inwards. It's a time when those psychological symptoms can really heighten. So for anyone listening who's thinking, well, actually, after I've ovulated, I really struggle, it's not a time where I feel like I just want to go inward. It's a time when I'm feeling like I hate the world. There might be something in that. It might not just be that your hormones are, coming down and declining. It could be that your hormones are coming down and declining, and your mind is responding to that, because that's what PMDD is. It's a sensitivity in the brain to hormonal fluctuations. So there's nothing untoward about my hormones. They're quite normal. I don't have a hormonal imbalance or anything like that, but it's how my brain responds to them as they fluctuate and decline after I've ovulated.
I had never appreciated, until I heard you talk, the magic that is inherent in our menstrual cycle. And for me, it's about bringing me slowing down and reconnecting with my body. And then, as you say, honoring what I need, rather than, again, this sort of, it's so difficult not to slip into this, external living. So as you say, looking at what everyone else is doing around you and then feeling like you have to keep up with them. And I hadn't appreciated that before. I hadn't appreciated that, our menstrual cycle is such a gift to us, as this reminder every single month to come back to ourselves, to be connected and to be honoring what do we need.
It really is like enlightening and wonderful to know that your menstrual cycle doesn't have to be the enemy. In fact, it's almost a gift from your body communicating what it needs, what your body needs. And I think when you can come to terms with that, and when you can understand that fully, you can really start to work with it. And if you're somebody who does have maybe like a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job, where you're expected to show up in the same way every day, then that can be really tricky. But just having the awareness that, this week is going to be harder for me. So if I can schedule that meeting for the week after, everyone's going to benefit, then absolutely do your best to advocate for that.
That's a really important point, because, as you say, most people don't necessarily have the luxury of running their own business, and so having total autonomy over their diary and their time. And it's really important, I think, for people to understand that they have more control than they maybe think they do. And I think this is where personal responsibility and accountability comes into it as well. Because, as you say, yes, if you've got to turn up and do a job, you might be like, oh, there's nothing I can do. But there are, if you spend some time looking, there are pockets of time when you can build in what you need. I feel as if it's really important, like what you're saying, people have a lot more control than maybe they think they do over their time and over their diary. And it doesn't have to be a wholesale transformation. It can just be building in these little pockets of time that are reflective of what you need. But what was your journey to sort of get to where you are today, and to have the wisdom that you have about, honoring rather than fighting your cycle, but honoring it?
If we go back to like 2014, first of all, so I was in this kind of rut of working different jobs, and I was really unhappy. I was overweight, and I knew I needed to change something, but I wasn't sure which thing to start with first. So I decided to lose some weight, and over a year I lost just under 4 stone, and that made me feel so much more confident and happier because I was healthier. And I just learned in that year to prioritize myself more and to put the time and effort into, cooking myself healthy food. And so I think that was my first dose of self-care, really. And because I'd had a lot of success with my weight loss, I decided to become a weight loss coach for the organization who I'd lost my weight with. And I did that as a part-time thing on the side. So I still stayed in corporate finance, but then, that paid my bills and it was kind of boring. But I was able to then go into my workshops and support people to feel amazing. And there's just nothing better than seeing people walk taller each week. And I loved the job so much. And then I was diagnosed with PMDD in 2018. And it was from there really that things really shifted, because I had to do a lot of learning about the condition, but I had to also do a lot of unlearning. I had to unlearn what I'd been kind of taught about menstrual health and mental health, but I also had to unlearn the stories that I had been telling myself for a very long time, that I was crazy, that I was a drama queen and attention seeking and all these other things that really had been PMDD. And I went through this huge, without sounding cheesy, journey of kind of discovering who I really was and learning more about me. And I became quite conflicted, because what I realized was my role as a weight loss coach wasn't necessarily congruent with my self-compassion over everything value, because I saw it from the clients that I worked with as a weight loss coach that they weren't always being self-compassionate. They weren't trying to grow and change or develop from a place of acceptance. It was all about punishment. And so that was beginning to be a real conflict for me. And then in December 2020, I was made redundant and the rug was just pulled from underneath me, because I loved what I did. And I just remember thinking, okay, I've got like 6 years coaching experience. I love the role. I don't want to talk about weight loss anymore. I love talking about hormones. I've loved having all these amazing conversations. I've been coaching in kind of the hormones and mindset space for 3.5 years now, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's mad how time flies, isn't it? Do you know, it's the fact that you said self-compassion is a value of yours is really intriguing to me, because I can see how that would have shown up as a theme in your story. And as you say, I think the motivator for a lot of people around change is to fix themselves. So it comes from this belief that I'm broken, or I should look like this in order to be fill in the blanks. So what was your journey like from judgment, shame to self-compassion?
I remember doing a huge amount of reading. I think I read every self-care book, every mental health book, and they were all brilliant and valuable. But in hindsight, that's what I was doing. I was looking for some sort of cure for life. I was looking for a fix to just make me better. And somewhere I did find a bit of an answer that kind of said, you don't need fixing. You don't. And that wasn't maybe an instant thing. And I think even now it's still something I have to kind of realize every now and again. But over time, I just realized that everyone is absolutely flawed. Nobody is perfect. And everybody is as valuable as the next person. And, I think we hear a lot now, don't we, a phrase of, treat yourself how you would a good friend. And, it's a great concept for helping people to live more compassionately. But I think for me, what that really made me realize was I am just as valuable as my best friend. I'm just as valuable as my mum. I'm just as valuable as a person who lives on the street. Like, I'm no better and I'm no worse. Our situations are different. But in terms of the value that I have on a human level, it's just the same as anyone else. And so that for me was really massive in making me think I need to treat myself with the same amount of respect that I would anybody else. And it's not about kind of being overly nice. It's about nurturing yourself.
That is, like, honestly so inspirational, because all I hear from that is liberation and freedom.
Yeah.
You know, in that level of, I love that. Try it and see. And I'm okay the way I am. You don't have to fix yourself, because there's ultimately nothing wrong with you. And as you said, you're worthy and of unconditional love and acceptance just as you are. You are at a human level. You are equal to everybody around you. That doesn't mean that then you don't want to grow and evolve and improve certain parts of yourself. And as you say, I think it's all coming back to acceptance and just being conscious of the control that I have over how I feel and my experience of life. And for me, that's what I think self-compassion gives and sort of opens up, is that feeling of control and improving the experience of my life.
Definitely. Yeah.
How do you anchor, like, what does your self-compassion practice look like in your life? So what are some of the tangible things that you do that really ground you in that, to be able to, go into the world kinder and more patient and more compassionate?
I think there's the small things that, we would probably label as self-care. So, like I've said before, journaling is massive for me. And if I'm not journaling, my second kind of favorite reflective practice actually is to be alone in my car driving somewhere, because I do so much self-reflection there when I'm just driving. And, driving can be quite mindless sometimes, can't it? Because it's automatic. And I find that I do a lot of my soul searching when I'm driving. So I do things that I know are going to help me feel better in the moment. But I also think a massive thing for me was making that decision to really work in a job, or, have a business that is so true to me. And, you don't have to own your own business to do that. But just knowing that when you go to work, are the company's values aligned to your own? Are the people within your team people who you would choose to spend time with? Because that's what you're doing at work. You're spending time with people who will influence you. They'll influence your mood, your feelings, your thoughts. Are they good people to have in your circle? And so for me, I think a huge part of self-compassion is how you spend your time.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's being conscious of energetically what you need at that point. Yeah, I hear you. So, Laura, we have a closing tradition on this podcast. I ask all of my guests, what is something that other people value that you do not?
This is going to sound so silly. And I've played with the word a little bit here. Something I don't really value is holidays. Now, I've played with the word because at first I was going to say travel. I don't really value travel, but I don't think that's right, because I quite like culture and I like exploring different culture, but I don't really value getting on a plane. I think that's more what it is. So I love to have, time away. But you know what? I love Wales. I love like doing things that are kind of like low key. I don't need big luxury holidays, I think is something I'm trying to say. I don't need time away from my life.
So, do you know, actually, one of my previous guests, Rory O'Hare, said exactly the same thing. And for somebody that is that person that loves to have holidays planned and to go away and travel, I was like, what? But I get it. I get your explanation, and I love what you're saying about not feeling like you need a holiday from your life. Because for me, that's the definition of success, when you've built a life for yourself that and as you say, it doesn't mean that you don't need to recharge and refresh, because we're all human, but your life is something that really genuinely is balanced and brings you pleasure. And I love hearing that. So, yeah, what a great answer. Thank you. Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.
In this episode, Laura spoke so beautifully about her self-compassion practice. And if you're excited to get started on your own, please head over to integrate.net. We have the most amazing journal on sale, and you can use that to kickstart your self-compassion practice. As always, I want to say thank you to my editor, Stian Moritz, and musician, Jamie Jenkin. Sending you all so much love. Bye for now.